Phil Spencer wants to put an itch.io on your Xbox. Stardew Valley finally allows you to drink mayonnaise. Horizon Forbidden West has come to PC, and sequels have us rebooting real hard.
Hi, I'm Nick, and the only sequel I want is Hey Ash, what you hunting?
Hi, I'm Josh, and what happened to Phil Spencer in a walled garden?
My name's Andy. Go to videogametango.com and watch this thing. Hey, welcome back.
Hello.
Yes.
How are you? Fine,
Hello.
thanks.
This is good. Hey, so Video Game Tango here. We're here to talk about video games instead of playing with our microphones like we haven't been doing this for the past
I think we spent
almost
an hour
4 years.
planning the opening every episode.
Yeah,
And
We have a whiteboard.
yeah.
The sad thing is there actually is a little bit of planning that goes into the opening, and it's still just
Well, never the
Muffed.
greeting.
Never
The greeting. Always the
Muffed.
opening, never the greeting.
I always wait for Andy, and the moment it feels like he's taken too long because he's trying to give himself space for editing,
Yeah.
I ruin it by saying
yeah.
something weird.
Yeah.
So I've just taken to just not saying anything until Andy says something.
So I don't know if you'll notice.
And then Andy just goes, hello.
I look, I'm about to say something, and then I won't, and then that hesitance fucks me up for my greeting. So
Yes,
that's
but I don't look at you anymore.
well,
I just make
good-
faces
okay.
and look at the camera.
Yeah.
Hello, Naughty. How are you? We are about to do a podcast. So, what do we have on the docket today?
On the docket today, hey, we've talked a lot about exclusivity in the near past, specifically with PlayStation.
I would not join any club that would have me.
And we've also talked about like how Xbox is looking to be kind of a more open platform, and how maybe they might inspire others to do something similar.
Apparently, they like money.
I
Who
guess
would've
so.
thought?
Because Polygon had a little interview with Phil Spencer lately. Specifically, they were going to talk to him about like potential upcoming new hardware, etc. But what the conversation turned into is actually a conversation about adding third-party game stores to the Xbox ecosystem. That means things like Epic Games Store, Steam, itch.io. Those three came up specifically.
Adam's peanut butter.
We'll get there eventually. They'll have that storefront too. But yeah, so we've talked about Xbox games being put on other platforms, but what about like other platforms being put on Xbox? That's what we're talking about now. Phil Spencer says that there is easily a version of the future where he thinks that Xbox would be talking about putting these third-party marketplaces on the Xbox ecosystem. And I, for one, am all for it. We have these consoles that are
exclusivity is awful.
yeah. And we have these consoles that are effectively PCs already. You know, they come with RAM storage. It's NVMe storage. It's regular DDR4, DDR5 RAM. They have custom designed chips, but really at the end of the day, all they are is NVIDIA Radeon graphics and AMD CPUs, right? And that's what we're running. That's our hardware, right? That's what's in our computers. That's what's powering gaming PCs.
that
Do
is
you have any specifics there,
yeah,
Josh?
that is essentially. I mean, what he's saying is true. And with Microsoft, with Phil Spencer being the head of Microsoft Gaming, he's relating it very much to a PC experience. When you load up your PC and you curate the experience that you want to have, you play the games that you want to have. I mean, that being said, Steam is like the fucking Wild West of gaming. So it's not like, I mean, there's going to be a lot of issues getting that on there. But at this point, the walled gardens that everybody has tried so hard to keep players in, starting to keep players out. And Microsoft is always at the head. Like they're all like for the last 30 years, all my life essentially, they've been leading it here. But Spencer said Moore's law, and that is not a law of physics, but a law of economics. They have those. It's a terrifying fact. The law.
Look up the Ferengi. They know all about it.
So Moore's Law has slowed down. The price of components of a console aren't coming down as fast as they have in previous generations. And ultimately worse, the console market isn't growing. So how a console pays for itself is by games on its storefront. So when a company produces a console, they subsidize a lot of that cost to us to pay for the console to eventually become profitable by a little piece of the games being sent to them for licensing and all that stuff to be on there. So that walled garden, especially in like the case of Sony, suddenly becomes, I see why they're so very protective of their exclusives all of a sudden when you have Microsoft doing something like this, because there's Xbox sales are flatlining in Europe. Xbox consoles aren't with the Gen Z and especially not Gen Alpha. That's why Xbox is looking at maybe developing a handheld in the near future, because when somebody in Gen Z is playing a video game, they don't want a thing that plugs into the TV. They want something that can go with them or can be plugged into the TV or can be utilized in 10 different ways rather than one. So it looks, and honestly, if Microsoft, I keep saying Xbox, if Microsoft says this is where the future of gaming goes and they put their considerable £1 trillion thumb onto the scale, who's to say it's not?
Yeah. He goes on to say specifically, consider our history as the Windows company. Mm-hmm. Nobody would blink twice if I said, hey, when you're using a PC, you get to decide the type of experience you have by picking where to buy games. There's real value in that. So Spencer believes console players would benefit from that freedom too, and so would console makers like Microsoft. And that's true. I mean, if I were looking at, say, the next round of Xbox and PlayStation comes out, we've got the PS6 and we've got the Xbox One 2. Because that's
dear God, please don't call it that, Spencer. Mr. Spencer, no.
Considering like, okay, what does each console do that is different from one another? Which one am I going to buy based on features? If I can download and purchase games from Steam, or my Steam library carries over to my Xbox, it's Xbox. I'm buying the Xbox. Mm-hmm. That's a choice that's easy for me to make. And that's also, I think that's a good way to increase console sales. A $500 Xbox Series X is a lot cheaper than getting into gaming PC.
Suddenly, that's what that is, man. They drop an Xbox brand mouse and keyboard, and your PC gaming, baby.
Yeah, for real. So I don't know if this is going to happen. This seems like it's certainly being considered, but I think I think you can only get a positive thing out of this.
I look at it in two ways. If we take a few steps back, there are two reasons they could be attempting to consider this. One, they are thinking that they can make more money than they're making right now doing it. Mm-hmm. Or two, they have not recently been making as much money as they expected to, and they're starting to look for other ways to make money.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, like Spencer can say whatever words he wants out of his mouth hole. They're only going to take this option if they think it's going to make them more money.
Yeah, because they're going to seek profit. Yeah.
Which makes me wonder, why now the idea of moving literally in the option or in the direction opposite exclusivity and move towards more an open market platform rather than a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago?
Because the console market is dying.
Because the console market is dying.
It's I mean, Phil Spencer literally says in this article that
it's flatlining.
Console sales have flatlined.
So they are realizing that if people aren't buying our consoles, the question in my mind isn't immediately, okay, well then how do we make more money? It's why aren't people buying our consoles? And you take a look at the factors that you can control. Okay, so we're coming out of COVID, things are starting to recover, but there's also other stuff going on. Maybe there's a lot of things that they don't have control over. Maybe it's also something to do with the games that you're putting out. You mentioned earlier, like you buy a new console and new games, right? In our teenage years, late 90s, 2000s, 2010s, for some of our younger audience, the new console meant that's your access to the new round of video games, right? But now you mentioned earlier before the podcast, your console is now currently being used as a media center, and it's a polite way of putting it. It is there to play HBO and Hulu and Netflix, right? You have all but fully converted over to the PC lifestyle, having seen the greener pasture, right? Maybe we should consider that people aren't buying new consoles for the new round of games because the new games aren't worth buying a new console for.
Yeah.
And that's going to tie into some of the things we're going to talk about later in this podcast regarding sequels and things of that nature. Now, I'm stretching, I'm reaching, but at the very least, we do know at the end of the day, this is about money. Consoles are flatlining. They need to fix that. I don't want to see consoles die out. But yeah, it raises a lot of questions, at least in my mind, as to why they would be doing this and not taking other tacks to make more money.
For sure. I mean, it does seem a little bit weird, but you know, it's got to be profit seeking. Like, I would like to think that Phil Spencer is being altruistic and he's just like, let's get more games to more people.
It's literally his job to not be altruistic.
Right. It's his job to make more money.
I feel like it's plain as day in the Polygon article. It's 100% about profits. He's saying the next gen, like millennials, you know, sure, we can game on consoles, we game on PCs. The markets that are growing right now in gaming are console and handheld. And,
PC and handheld.
PC and handheld.
Yeah.
And that's the experience that Xbox is leaning into with developing a development of a handheld. And also Sarah Bond said that the next leap in the next hardware leap in Xbox is going to be unlike anything we've seen. And if they can get this deal, you're buying a $600 computer. Is what Xbox is offering next. Yeah. They're trying to move Xbox into the market of gaming that is growing. It's purely profit driven, and if more people get to play more games as a byproduct and still of profit and still, you know, make a little more money, then hot darn, I get to look like a hero, Phil Spencer, and I make Microsoft not just a dominant player in gaming, but the king of gaming. Honestly, to me, this separates like what Sony honestly tried to say in the FEC hearings. Is this is the difference between $1 trillion company and $1 billion company.
Yeah. Factor of 1,000.
Yeah. You also have to consider that, you know, they did bring up Phil Spencer and Sarah Bond both brought up handhelds in this article. And while, you know, I've been pretty preachy about it being a growing segment, I didn't know quite how much. And this is something I looked up fairly recently, but looking at it again is, so Valve has not released their sales for the Steam Deck. ROG Ally, Asus hasn't released their sales from the ROG Ally. But there are third party firms that have looked into what the expected sales were. The research firm Omdia reported that the Steam Deck sold 1.62 million units in 2022, and estimated that the Steam Deck would pass 3 million units sold since its launch sometime during 2023. So it's expected that by now, at least, the Steam Deck has sold, 3 million units. And I can imagine that the ROG Ally is probably, it did launch later, but it's probably in close to sales numbers because it's sold in brick and mortar stores. It's not something you can only buy online. So I'd imagine it's fairly competitive in the sales in that range, at least. So that's actually kind of surprising to me because while I expected the sales to be pretty good, I didn't know that they were going to be in the several million units sold, a piece.
For the Steam Deck?
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah, I would expect the Steam Deck to sell 1 million copies.
Yeah.
I mean, again, Steam isn't Microsoft. It's not even Sony, but it is the titan of PC gaming, right? And they have multi-million numbers of users. As of the middle of last year, the ROG Ally sold 500,000.
Yeah, it's hard to get the sales figures on
I
the
could
ROG
see
Elite.
them nearing 1 million. I don't see them selling much more than 1 million. And this is the question of handhelds. Like, we've been trying to make handhelds work outside of Nintendo because they're in their own league
Yeah.
for decades.
Yeah.
And the problem is we finally got a handheld to everyone. Suddenly everyone has a handheld that can play just about everything on a unified platform. It's Android smartphones or iPhones. And then we just didn't use it. We did not use it to make good games.
Yeah.
We put ad games on there.
Yeah.
Google Play and iGame, whatever iPhone uses. It's just become a platform to make games of no substance, right? So I really personally, of my opinion of me, whatever that matters, handhelds are not the way to go. They clearly aren't the thing that's going to make you a lot of money because we already have everyone with a cell phone, right? If they want to make handhelds work, they first need to start making games for phones that are going to get people to buy them and not in like a monetary whale sense. Make good games for the phone. You already can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not going to do that, you're going to put out a handheld with what games on it? The games they could already buy on Xbox, the games they could already buy on PC. Like Steam Deck got away with it because it's PC games.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Xbox can usually also be played on PC because
Right.
it's Microsoft.
Yeah,
so you're just providing a third option,
Yeah.
but in a shittier form factor. Right. I don't know. I think that's a really big gamble for Microsoft trying to make a handheld.
I don't know that they'll necessarily start making a handheld. I'm thinking that maybe they're looking at ways to better monetize in the handheld space, maybe.
Could be.
You know, making sure that Xbox, their marketplace, works on these handhelds and that kind of thing. Because
I think
it does
that'd be
natively.
a smart idea.
It does natively on the ROG Ally.
Yeah.
Like you can use your Game Pass on ROG Ally because that's running Windows.
Yeah.
It's a little bit harder to do with a Steam Deck, but it can be done. It just takes a little bit of trickery because it's running on Linux, right? So you got to run an emulation layer on top of the video game that you're wanting to play from Xbox. But you know, people are doing it successfully. So I can see them more than making a handheld. I don't know that they'd go that way. Maybe they would though if they put out. You know, I could see PlayStation and Xbox potentially doing this, where they put out their mainline console, the PlayStation 6 and the Xbox One 2, but they also put out a handheld variant of it. I could see that happening like per console generation, maybe. You know, that's just conjecture and thought for the future, but you know, I could see that happening, wanting to jump into that segment.
Honestly, like when they were talking about it, I was kind of imagining something that's like a console PC thing, but then you pop it out
Like a Switch.
and it's like, it's literally you just pop it out and you can take it with you now, and do something like that. I mean, that's
Yeah, I mean that may be the future going forward. You know, who knows? You know, it's fun to future trip and think about that kind of thing.
fun
But
to speculate.
yeah, who knows? For one, it looks like at least they're open to third party marketplaces on the Xbox, which I think that's only
crazy
a
go
positive.
nuts.
Yeah, I mean that's cool. That is a low barrier to entry cost wise, you know, version of getting a good PC into your living room. So I'm all for it. On another topic, I do want to talk about a game that I've been playing.
On the PC.
Yeah, little known game on the PC. Called Stardew Valley. Not little known. It's very popular, of course. In fact, I think they reached like 400-something thousand concurrent players while the announcement was happening. The Concerned Ape, the developer for Stardew Valley, used to be just one person. Now it's a small team. Came out with the 1.6 update for Stardew Valley. And dude, I gotta say, like, I'm an avid Stardew Valley player. Like, I've always been a Harvest Moon guy. You know, I play these farm sims. It's my dose of cozy games. I would say, of course, I don't play them like they're cozy games. I min-max the shit out of every run that I make playing Stardew Valley. Like, when I go to bed, I piece out my time. Okay, well, I know it's going to take an hour and 20 minutes to get to the blacksmith, Clint, and I have to open these things. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to water the first 6 rows of my crops, go see Clint, and then hopefully I get the thing from Clint that I need to make sure that I can smith something while I'm doing the rest of my crop watering. It's a whole thing. I'm a different breed of person. That said, this came out with a lot of new features. I'm just going to go over a few of them because they're amazing. They've got a whole bunch of new festivals. They have something called a mastery system accessed via a new area, which grants powerful perks and items. I don't even know what that means yet. I haven't gotten that far. Add a new farm type, the Meadowlands farm. It has a chewy bluegrass that animals love. You also start with a coop and 2 chickens. But more than that, they came out with a bunch of new NPC dialogue. They came out with more content for Ginger Island, which is part of a big expansion they had a couple patches ago. It's a huge update, and we talk at length about AAA versus passion projects and indie games, and this is I think is a shining example up there with like Deep Rock Galactic, where Concerned Ape at like patch 1.4 said that it was going to be the last patch ever for Stardew Valley. But the guy comes up with new ideas, and he's just like, yeah, I love this game. I want to make more of it. We have chocolate, what's it called? Something Chocolatier,
Haunted
Chocolatier coming out. Who knows when, being made by Concerned Ape as well. But he's, because he loves Stardew Valley, he's got to throw some attention still. And then getting such an enormous patch like 1.6 was a nice little surprise for me. I wasn't watching for these updates like I normally would. So when 1.6 popped up, it jumped back out at me, and it just reminds me how good of a game it is and how complete it is. And for like 20 something bucks, man, pick up Stardew Valley. Like if you're into cozy games at all, it's like the go-to cozy game.
King of cozy.
The king of cozy. That's right. Well, speaking of games that we're talking or that we're playing,
I do want to talk about that.
Yeah, sure.
We plan on talking about kind of a meta game related subject later, and I think that brought up something that I would like to talk about next session, which is the idea of cozy and casual games.
Sure.
I think there's a lot more weight there than most people realize.
Yeah.
And after having recently watched a video by Jenna Stieber, formerly of Polygon, on the subject, it's made me kind of paradigm shift a little and think more about the idea of why we play games in the first place.
Yeah.
That said, I have been playing the new Horizon game, Forbidden West, sequel to, I think it was 2017's Horizon Zero Dawn, which back when I had a PS4 was one of the few, because I kind of stopped playing them roughly after Assassin's Creed 2, one of the few open world action RPGs I've played in a long time. The general formula for Horizon games is akin to that of a carnival. They have grown and found a lot of roots in a lot of different directions, but at the end of the day, you are allowed to openly explore a quote-unquote confined area, find lots of points of interest with various tasks, whether they be puzzles or challenges or platforming segments or combat, to give you a width and breadth of things to do. Usually paired with some kind of overarching narrative that you work towards the end of the game. I don't really need to define these games. You know what I'm talking about if you're listening to this podcast. What is Horizon 2 compared to Horizon 1, maybe compared to other games of its ilk? Well, Horizon Zero Dawn, the first one, for me, combined competent, bordering on good writing with a very well-paced divulgence of the game's story that slowly leaked information to you over the course of the entire game, culminating in a reveal of what the game is about in a really fantastic way. That was paired with solid gameplay that was attempting to take attack away from attack combos and the nature of stuff like Assassin's Creed or Phoenix Rising, where you're trying to wear down a bag of hit points. In the first game, you play essentially as a Stone Age barbarian huntress fighting robot dinosaurs. And when you open the game, you're like, why are there robots? Why are they dinosaurs? Why are they all these things? That's answered. But what the important thing is you can't just go toe-to-toe with these bots. They're 3,000 pounds of metal and carbon fiber, and you're one little barely grown adult huntress woman. This second game leans even heavier into that. One of the things that I both hate and love, which I'll explain in a minute, is that the way you fight in combat in this game, especially on any difficult over normal, is going to require you to make extensive use of the kit they provide you, aka The Witcher. Witcher 3 especially was the one I remember most, where between your potions and your alchemy and all your magic, if you're not making full utilization of your kit on harder difficulties, you are going to fail. I was not really ready for that in this game, and having played it through on normal, I have been able to brute force my way through the first 20 hours of the game. I'm now entering what is essentially chapter 2 of the game, because much like the first one, you play through the opening tutorial in a few hours, and then you're in the opening starting tutorial area. It's called the Daunt in the second game, Forbidden West. And you get 10, 15 hours into it, and then you realize, oh, I just started the game. And you leave that opening area and you're like, I haven't even uncovered 10% of the map yet. And there's a lot of stuff to do. It's great. But now that I'm in the open area, I'm finding a few things. One, I'm playing on mouse and keyboard. This game was designed for the PS5, both the first and the second one on PlayStation with controllers in mind. And it has taken near constant fiddling and rebinding of keys and a lot of effort to make it flow well. I do not recommend, even if you're like me and a PC gamer at heart, you play this on mouse and keyboard. If you have the option of playing on a controller, it is doable. I have I've come to an agreement with the game. But let me run you through the list. So you have at any time 6 different weapons you can switch to on your weapon hotbar, each of which has multiple different ammo types and each do different things. On top of that, you have what was the D-pad is now a little utility option in the bottom left of your screen that you scroll through the ability to use 3 different levels of healing potions, 4 different types of utility potions, almost a dozen different types of traps, including multiple different types of meals you can eat for buffs, rocks to distract enemies, your ability to call your mount, all bound to Q and X, where I have to rapidly cycle through them on the keyboard and then press a button to use them, while I'm also trying to figure out which weapon to use, which ammo type to use, as well as actually play the game and fight the dinosaurs. It is a game where a controller's normal 12 to 16 buttons all at your fingertips is very well coded for. Playing it on the keyboard and mouse, although I greatly appreciate the accuracy the mouse gives me. I can constantly pull off the kind of shots that I want to take. You have so many options available to you because the game wants you to use everything from tripwires and smoke bombs and gas grenades and lateral throws, straight onto Jai style rock slings that you catch like boomerangs. It is a lot to keep track of in the middle of a fight. That has been my first burden. The only other really major negatives I want to talk about is that the writing has taken a bit of a dip. I would put it in solid B territory. It has that problem that open world games have where, an example, I had a small village that was on the brink of death. They were being attacked by enemy bandits, and I couldn't get them to leave their village to safety because they had too much like emotional and spiritual ties to the area. This isn't an RPG. I was not given the option to verbally try to convince these people. But even that aside, the safety place was literally 300 meters away. The map is big, don't get me wrong, but like narratively, they could have taken a day trip like to the safe place.
Right.
Because the game is trying to imply a much larger area than the actual meat space the game takes up.
Yeah.
And the dialogue can't really support that. That said, voice acting is great. Whatever motion capture they used for facial animations, fantastic. Ashley Birch, the continuation voice actress for Aloy, the main character, continues to do a great job. She really gives Aloy a lot of depth that I don't think would have been done by a lesser voice actress. What do I like about this game compared to the first one? If you haven't played it or if you had, they've leaned heavier into the game. They could have easily gone more into, just, how Assassin's Creed, you go to the towers and you unlock the things. They have that in this game. You climb a robot giraffe, but there's like 5 in the whole game. I've been playing the game for over 20 hours. I've only done 2. and each one had a unique puzzle. I had to use a ballista with anchors to weigh the second one down because it didn't have the ability to climb it like the first one did, which was kind of unique, right? They have continued the story in a decent way. Their pacing is not quite as good, but the idea of what is actually happening, what Aloy needs to do to save the world is there. The only real major downside I have of this game is that I love and hate the climbing system.
Mm-hmm.
Climbing has become a big thing. It's always been a big thing in games. Ladders have been a problem for game developers since games were made, right? And they have done some amazing stuff and some horrible stuff that I do want to touch on before I wrap up here. They have a seemingly almost procedural climbing system where at any time you go to climb a rock wall, depending on the geometry of the wall, Aloy has extremely good animations on where she grabs onto and where she can go to next. You also have the option of turning on like a 3D hologram overlay of where she can grab. I cannot imagine playing the game without it. Mm-hmm. As much as I would love to turn it off for immersion, being able to know which walls are climbable and which ones aren't is great. And when she is doing the climbing and I'm taking my time and letting the game kind of flow me through her climbing, it looks fantastic and it feels great. But that is compiled with these puzzle platform sections where to get to the stage where you need to climb, you need to spend roughly 30 seconds to 2 minutes getting into position, running up through a tunnel and getting into position. And then Aloy's ability to snap to climbing spots is on the whim of a French noble. Mm-hmm. I will jump to a climbing spot sometimes, and Aloy will just shunt left to grab a spot to the left of where I was aiming. That's fine. What isn't fine is when I jump clearly in the direction of a spot I need to grab to, and she just doesn't grab it. I fall 20 feet, and then I have to spend 2 minutes getting back into position to attempt to make that jump again. It's specifically whoever designed their puzzle platforming sections did not communicate well with the actual model making designers who made these things.
Right.
Because there's so many times where I come to the most simple of jumps and I fail 3, 4, 5 times in a row because the game isn't doing what I'm telling it to.
Right.
Which means that I've now wasted 10 minutes of my life trying to literally amount to what's climbing a ladder and jumping backwards to grab an edge. That is the only thing that I am dreading in this game, and these little sections that are poorly designed. The combat and the story and the overworld travel, everything else is fantastic. Again, just as a last comparison to the first one, you are going to have to lean a lot more heavily into the tools they give you for these combats. You cannot shoot things with arrows after the first 10 hours and expect them to die. You need to be using frost arrows in the armor sections that are weak to hit them with status effects so that you have a moment to equip another tool to hit their weak point, all the while dealing with other robots of other types that are weak to other things and have other weak points. And I love it. I love that this game is like, you can spend as much time as you want to setting up for a fight and we're going to reward you for it. And if you don't do that, you better be damn fucking good at combat to make it through. That doesn't really kick in until you leave the starting area. It's pretty loose and easy in the first 10 or so hours. But if you like a game that is going to challenge you in your ability to tactically and strategically think through fights, I don't know of an action RPG better than the Horizon games. So give it a really good recommendation. The game is currently sitting at a B+, A- for me, whereas Horizon Zero Dawn was probably an A for me so far. But then again, I'm only 20 hours into it. It's probably going to be a 60 to 80 hour game. So,
right on. Well, it's interesting that you bring all of that up because the way you talk about this game, it reminds me so much of what I'm experiencing with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It's got a lot of the same, because it has a lot of the same tropes that we're getting used to in these kind of open world adventure games. You know, you have to ascend the thing to clear part of the map. In Final Fantasy VII, a few of those have some tricks that you got to pull in order to make that happen. In Rebirth, I'm playing on what's called dynamic difficulty. So the game actually scales based on how well you're doing in fights. So a fight gets over and it's like, okay, well, you took like no damage in that fight. We're going to up the difficulty of fights. it doesn't seem like it's even done arbitrarily. It seems like more off like the enemies are doing special moves against you more frequently, and you are going to have to use, like you're going to have to assess your enemy so you can find out what its magical weak points are, what its immunities are, and what its what's moves are best against it. So it's interesting. They're two very different games. Like one is effectively just an open world JRPG. This is much more an action adventure platformer open world game. But it's kind of cool to see their similarities. Like I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, well maybe this is more of an open world game that I can get into, because I do like those things where preparing for a battle ahead of time or understanding how a specific enemy works and preparing for that fight ahead of time gives you an advantage. I love that stuff. I live for that stuff in gaming. So, it seems like a lot of fun, man.
Yeah. I recommend it. It's one of those games where it does try and give you a mild recap of the first game, but this game definitely expects you to have played the first one. If you're trying to follow the story, you're either going to be spending a lot of time in the journal reading notes up on every character and they're like just lore dumps of what's happened. The story of the first one, I touched on a little bit. It's a pretty bone-shaking revelation what has happened to the Earth in the first one. And it takes the whole game for you to figure out what's going on. Every time they answer a question, they give you another one. And I love to talk about it, but I'd hate to spoil it. It was one of my most favorite reveals of any story in this kind of genre. And Horizon Zero Dawn 2 can't really compete with that because, it's the first game in the series. But they have revealed more information. I'm like, okay, this is generally a good direction to take the story. So yeah, if you haven't played the first one and you just want to pick this one up, go watch a recap video of the first one. You're going to regret not doing it.
Yeah. So the unfortunate thing for me, and the only reason that I haven't played Horizon Zero Dawn, is I did get the game spoiled really early on. So I was like, dude,
that would have sucked. I would be very pissed if the first one had been spoiled for me.
So real quick, that actually, I think that raises a good point. Like, do you think the game is still worth playing if I already know?
I think that if you already know the story of at least the main plot points of the first one, I think Horizon Forbidden West, the second one, is worth playing.
Okay.
If you can get Horizon 1 cheap, sure, but also be aware, it's like, if you speed through it, it's still a 40 to 50 hour game.
Sure.
The game is still fun, but it was the first of its kind, which means it was rough around the edges in a lot of the gameplay factors. Horizon 2 here has really polished a lot of those.
Okay.
So it's like any game where there's two in the series, where the first one is kind of rough, but it has that novelty factor that it's a brand new story.
Right.
So if that's been spoiled for you, I don't know, just... I wouldn't not recommend playing the first one because, of course, there's a lot of stuff that recaps or the opening tutorial of the game aren't going to tell you about individual characters, and you're not going to have the relationship there. But the first one was much more of an RPG than this one. Aloy routinely in the first game had 3 dialogue options, either emotion, intelligence, or opinionated were kind of the 3 choices. And in the first 3 hours of the game, you probably made a dozen or 2 of those choices. I'm 20 hours in this game. I've made 2.
Okay.
This is a story game that you are along the ride for. You are not developing Aloy's character and learning who she is because she's now defined.
Okay. Yeah.
She is a woman on a mission that no one person should ever have to do. And she's struggling with the notion of whether she has the capacity to pull off what needs to be done. She performs at a near superhuman level because she's a video game protagonist, but even that, she's still one person. Like, it takes a lot out of her to fight. Like, your opening 2 hours is this opening scene fighting these giant snakes, and it takes the whole thing just to set up the fight for her to be able to fight one of them. You know, she's not the Flash, right?
Yeah.
She's not Tony Stark. And yeah, it again, once you get into the game, I know you're not super fond of open world games. There's a lot of side chaff to do. There's a whole board game mini game. There's bases to raid, like in Far Cry.
Yeah.
You know, there's a million side quests. So if you don't enjoy doing that, that's fine. For me, how I pace it out is one night I sit down, I do a bunch of side stuff. The next night I play, I do main storyline quest. And for me, it almost feels like playing two different games.
No,
Right.
to be honest, it's all of that stuff that makes. So I love all of that stuff. The extra chaff. I'm a bit of a completionist. You know, I like to
A lot
experience.
of things to complete in this game.
That's the thing. That's the thing. Is usually by the time I am getting toward endgame, I'm usually fairly burnt out. Like
Yeah.
I already feel like I have gotten the total experience, right? Even if I haven't gotten all the story, there are often times that I feel like I've gotten the full experience. There's no more gameplay left for me. I've done it all.
What makes or breaks it for me, that factor in these kinds of games, is can I at almost any point decide to just say, I'm done doing the chaff, let me blaze through the main story and finish the game. I remember specifically with like Dragon Age 2, this was a huge problem where I got roughly halfway through the game and was like, I'm not upset enough that I want to put this game down, but I want it to be over. I want to finish it. And the game just kept going and I could not just get it to finish. I don't think Horizon has that problem.
Okay.
Like at any time I could just continue the main storyline quest and they're big cinematic things. Another side point, holy shit, is this just a movie? Like I haven't played a AAA game in a while. There is so many cutscenes in this game. It's not a bad thing. It's just like a lot of this game is story driven.
Totally, yeah.
And I realized that just this last session playing through one of the main storyline quests that like in the time it took me to play through that main quest, I played as much as there were cutscenes.
Yeah.
So do be aware that this is almost like a kind of TV show. You're watching through a lot of stuff. And of course you still have control of your character, but do be aware that you're not going to be in full control of Aloy, kind of like you were in the first game.
Sure. You know,
she's on a mission. Everything is, you know what you need to do. You're not discovering the secrets of the world.
I think people in the AAA space are prepared for that, just because that describes a lot of AAA gaming. You know, it started with Metal Gear Solid 2, and then everybody decided that they needed to have an equal amount of time in cutscenes versus gameplay. Like it's you get that same experience in God of War. It's the same experience in the Final Fantasy VII Remake Rebirth.
I don't think it's perfect, but I think it is a good choice. It's a good thing to fall back on, where it's like there's a lot of things that you can do in a narrative cutscene you can't do in gameplay, and vice versa. Lastly, I want to talk about, I haven't looked too heavily into it because I'm not a hardware nerd, but this game is pretty decently well optimized. I have a lower end gaming PC. I'm playing it on lower specs, and it has met or exceeded all my expectations. I could probably run it near medium specs without much issue. But between the way they shot the motion capture and the general vibe and setting of the game, anytime there's low quality textures and whatnot, it doesn't bother me. And they're not often. They're usually in cutscene. I feel like they actually use the beginning of major cutscenes as places to render shaders. Because the only time I've seen any stuttering or stopping has been at the beginning of cutscenes. Like gameplay is seamless. I haven't encountered even, you know how like in Tomb Raider, you have to squeeze through a crack so it can load the next area? This game definitely does that, but I couldn't tell you exactly where. It's so fucking seamless, and I appreciate that. Load times, even on a normal hard drive, are very low, sometimes on the matter of just a few seconds going to a new area. Saving the game, the screen goes black for half a second. Yeah. The dialogue doesn't even stop in the background.
Well, you're actually not even on a hard drive. You are on an NVMe. Like you're on really fast storage. Yeah.
Well, get one of those.
Yeah, get one of those.
It's really nice.
No, you need.
I take all that back.
It is 2024, people. You need if you don't have a solid state drive already, you need one.
Yeah,
that is like you must be using.
I can't even read the tooltips between loading scenes. So fast. It's like, man, dude, this game is optimized to shit.
I remember when I got a solid state drive the first time, like because I got a really early one. I won one from an NVIDIA sweepstakes. And I installed that in my computer, and Colin happened to be over, and he's like, dude, I happened to be playing Skyrim, and he's like, you didn't even get a tooltip. And I was like, yeah, I don't see the loading screens, dude.
It's like the Matrix. I don't even see the loading screens.
Well, he's playing it on the Xbox 360, and there are like fucking 8-minute loading screens on Skyrim, man. Yeah.
Yeah. So thumbs up for Forbidden West. If you haven't experienced the first one and you have the opportunity, do so. It's a treat. But yeah, second one is worth playing through, even if you don't.
Yeah. So we were discussing briefly earlier. Like, I'm not sure exactly where this conversation was going or is going, but we were talking earlier about sequels and sequelitis and remakes, remasters, and how we felt about them, and like ultimately where we think they, or ultimately what we think about them. I think all of us are a little like we're all suffering from some sequelitis. I think we make that pretty apparent in just the way we talk, especially on the podcast. Like, we talk a lot about new IP, indie games versus AAA, and you know, where you see in the AAA space, there's realistically in the AAA space, you only see like 30 games that come out every year. And most of them have a 2 or a 3 or a subtitle in them because they're a sequel or a prequel, or they're in the same universe, or, you know, etc. They happen to be linked to another game series at the very least, or another property in that, for that matter. And yeah, I would just, you know, I thought it'd be an interesting topic. Mm-hmm. You know, as far as like where we think the industry is at the moment with that, where we think it's going, and, you know, how we feel about it.
I'd like to actually break down what a sequel is, in the sense that why do we make sequels? Mm-hmm. And we don't have to talk about all these, but I feel like there's two lenses you can view it through: the consumer lens and the production lens, right?
Yeah.
As far as the production lens, you kind of have three reasons to make a sequel. One, your team is comfortable working in that set and setting with that graphic engine and that modality. Mm-hmm. Two, your game directors want to continue the story of that game series.
Yeah.
And three, what is more and more common, and I think the thing that most people reject when we talk about sequelitis in TV shows, movies, and games over the last 20 years, is the fact that brand recognition is a very easy way for companies to make money.
Sure.
So
totally.
if we continue the same series, we know people bought the first ticket, they don't want to miss out on the second one, they continue that. On the consumer end, I think we really only have two reasons why we like sequels. One, the setting, genre, and vibe of the world is something we love. Or two, we care about the characters in the story, and we want to see it continue. Those can overlap. You can have both, right? But those are the two main factors for why you would want a sequel at all. Why don't you want something new and novel? Well, it's because I either like the setting it is, or I want to see where the story goes with these individual characters. We kind of brought this topic up because sequelitis, that phrase was probably coined over 10 years ago, if not sooner. And we've been seeing that ever since really the early aughts. The idea of rehashing things from the 90s and 80s because of the various reasons I've listed out. I think more and more into the late aughts and the early 2010s, it was ease of getting butts in seats, ease of selling copies. We can just make Aliens 5 and Terminator 9 and Honey, I Shrunk the Kid 17, or you know what I mean, because it's a set formula. We already have a foothold to start off on. We get brand recognition, so on and so forth. I kind of feel like that's dying away in some of the veins of AAA TVs, movies, and games, but we can talk about that. You have any top level opinions so far on the idea?
Well, I mean, as far as gaming goes, some of one of the most looked forward to games for me last year was a sequel, Fallen Order. So that, I was really looking forward to that. Now I am looking forward to some original Star Wars IP. Worried about Ubisoft and what they're going to do to it, but it is coming out. But the other big games of this year, like that are coming out, are Grand Theft Auto 6, and everyone's salivating for Mass Effect 5 rumors, or Dreadwolf. You talked about Dragon Age, the game that just went. Dreadwolf might be coming out this year, maybe.
What is Dreadwolf?
That is Dragon Age 4.
Oh, that's the working title.
Yep.
Okay.
So I feel like that's fairly much alive and well. And then we're honestly, in as far as media goes, we're getting another fucking Harry Potter. Like, we're getting another
It's a
Harry
can
Potter.
of magical worms. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean,
Maybe we could use this topic to potentially educate our listeners on what makes a good sequel and what doesn't, and which ones you should avoid. So the idea of a new Harry Potter in mind, at this point, Harry Potter is tenured, right? It is a fandom that has survived the test of time, and it is going to stick around probably akin to the same amount that Star Trek and Star Wars will. It was that big of a deal when it came out. And it does not have the TV and movie legacy that the Star Wars and Star Trek films have. So I don't know if its longevity is going to reach into the next generations. But as far as us millennials are alive, there's going to be people wanting more Harry Potter stuff. And why? Why is Harry Potter so big? There's a lot of reasons you can put it. For me, the way that Rowling was able to create the Harry Potter universe is the same way that the Star Wars universe or the Marvel universe or any of these big universes are made, and that they're providing your imagination room to fill slots, right? It is this showing, not telling, with the implication that maybe you too can become a wizard, right? Maybe you can pretend to be Luke Skywalker or be on the USS Enterprise or have superpowers. Is a very standard Portal fantasy, a normal kid getting transported to a magical place. And it just struck a right time and a right chord. And once it goes viral like that, then you can have the fandom take off and expand that canon. Do we need another official Harry Potter thing? I don't know. It depends on what it is. It depends on how much Rowling's tied to it.
Well, I mean, for me, it's just that I don't know. I guess it's probably been over a decade since the last movie came out, I guess, probably
around there. I don't look it up. It'll make me feel old.
Yeah. They're redoing the actual Harry Potter one, like that storyline. That's what they're redoing. It's not like they're doing a story set in the magical world. They're literally retelling Harry Potter's story in a TV show format. So, I mean, it's not even a sequel. It's just like a retelling. And for some things, I am 100% okay with a remaster. I mean, you think of something like Masters of the Universe, like cheesy, corny, awful 80s movie, but
perfect 80s movie.
Yeah, okay, perfect 80s. Yes. But something like that could look fucking bitchin' today.
Sure.
And be a lot of fun. But I mean, it'd probably wind up just like a Transformers movie or something like that, right?
It is important to point out that a lot of our favorite fandoms from the 80s all originated from the kernel that was product placement.
Oh, yeah.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Transformers, Rainbow Little Pony. All these things were ways to get kids interested in buying products.
Yeah.
And because the creators of those things, the creators of the Transformers show or the Conan show or whatnot, took the time to put a little more effort in than they needed, combined with childlike wonder, the kids of the 80s and early 90s, like we were able to blossom these universes into way more than their source material allowed for, which allowed them to continue, right? The idea of talking robots that come from another planet, like it wasn't a big thing anywhere else, right? You know, and they kind of exist in no thing, but yeah, I'm just sorry. That's just a side note that most 80s canon kind of exist in their own category for that reason.
It does, because like all of those were to sell toys. He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, toys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, toys. Yeah, I mean, you said it exactly. It's like those were they made TV shows to sell toys.
Yeah.
So that is kind of its own thing.
And it's looking like Josh hit the nail on the head here. They are planning on doing a TV series on Max or whatever come 2026. just based off the books,
And-
they're going to redo it. And
and-
this is
To be honest, I think that it's hard to tell sometimes when this is the case. But I think more than where we have issues with sequelitis and we're tired of sequels, and more than we are tired of remakes, remasters, and reboots, I think more than that, I think people are getting smarter and people are starting to understand when something is just a cash grab, right?
Yeah.
Because I love sequels to video games that I love,
Sure.
right? I pay money for sequels to video games, to movies, to TV that I love, until it starts falling short of the quality that was initially brought and starts feeling phoned in, starts feeling just more like this is being continued for somebody to make money, right? All they're doing is giving more to an audience that wants more so they can make money. There's always going to be profit motive. But I think as long as the creativity, the narrative, whatever brings you to that universe, to that franchise, I think as long as that stays intact and is true to itself, I think it's fine. I don't have a problem with sequels, reboots, remasters. Would I like to see more IP? Yes. Would I like to see some more creative things come out? Yes, for sure. My problem isn't with not getting that. My problem is with just the blatant cash grabs that we're seeing. Where I see issues is games franchises like Assassin's Creed, where it is effectively the same game every year. The Call of Duties, where it is the same game every year. There's a few little differences sprinkled in here and there.
A bit or a bob here or there.
Yeah. Maybe the setting changed, but realistically, the gameplay loop does not, right? Where they can settle with the exact same formula with slightly different graphic sets and cobble that together, and you get the new Call of Duty, right? And I pick on Call of Duty a lot, just because it is what it is. I don't think it's been good since Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2.
cash
Personally,
machine.
it is just
amazing at making money.
yeah, of
but
course.
that's all it does.
But I think more than anything is it just fuels an already existing addiction that people have to it, right? I think we're just giving another sequel for addicts at that point, and I feel like that is just absolute cash grab at its finest. Where I don't have a problem is, I hate to bring it up all the time, but it's what I'm doing, it's what I'm playing, is Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth. Those are totally new retellings of old source materials. It does such a weird thing where it sticks to the story of the original, but adds so much additional on top of it, and manages to not dilute from the original that I appreciate so much. So yeah, while it'd be nice to see fewer reboots, remakes, remasters. I do have fun with them too, and I think as long as there's an honest attempt to continue making them good and to continue pleasing a player base with new content, I don't think there's a problem with that. I think it's when it becomes a blatant cash grab that there's a problem.
So in that same vein, I recently watched X-Men 97. They dropped, and it was
Tell us what that is.
so X-Men 97 for our millennial listeners. It's picking up essentially where that old X-Men show from the 90s that we all watched, Saturday. You know it.
Yeah.
Don't want to get copyrighted.
Yep, that's all we can do of it.
Yeah.
Saturday morning cartoons, watching the X-Men, playing it at school, fighting over who got to be Wolverine, all that good jazz. It's back. And it's good.
It's the same show.
It feels like the same show. It feels similar. It feels good, but you can definitely tell there's, of course, modernity added into it.
Yeah.
And honestly, in my opinion, motherfucker's a slam dunk. I'm looking forward to
The
watching.
reviews online look great.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to watching the next iteration of it. So I don't know. I really like sequels and remasters when it's curated in the right way, when something's thought out, when there's an end in mind. Because if it takes 3 parts to tell a story, that's fine, so long as the end is in sight from the very beginning when you start out to tell, like, you know what I mean? It's like, it shouldn't, like you were saying, it just shouldn't be in like an open face cash grab. But
if you look at a lot of media franchises that have done well, one through line that you see often is that the story is decided before it starts. A recent example, Star Wars Andor. The whiteboarding and essentially initial story development of that was not left open-ended in the hopes for a funding of a second season. The story was written to completion before they started filming.
Totally insular.
That isn't a for sure sign of your story, your game, or your TV show being great. What it is good for is continuation.
Yeah.
If you are going to have a sequel, and you know you're going to have a sequel because the first part of your story arc cannot conclude in one game or one TV season or one movie, then you're set up to not fail, which is what is going to happen if you're not. I mean, we just take a look at Game of Thrones. They started that without knowing how that ended in two senses. One, the story literally hadn't been written yet.
Still has not.
Still has not. And two, they had nothing really in place concretely for how to end it in the case that Martin had not finished it by then, right? Got too big, got too powerful, and they said, fuck it, we're amazing, the two directors. They're going to let us do anything. Let's just phone it in until we're done, then we can get like that Marvel money. And we saw what happened with that, right? You see a similar thing with games that aren't necessarily AAA games that want to have a story. You never know as a game designer if you're going to get a sequel. Like, you can plan to have one from the get-go, but it's surprising to me how many, especially because TV is so popular and HBO, Netflix, and all these little serialized dramas and all these little shows that have 1, 2, 3 seasons, how often the story is not, at the very least, on a large, broad, vague scale. It needs to be done. Like, you need to finish it. You cannot be like, I'm just going to continue this show until it's dead in the water and the horse is
Heroes.
beaten. Heroes is a great example. Like, it's great for the corporation side because they can keep bringing in money. But I'm a person. I want to be enriched by the media I consume. I want to experience stories that ask questions that make me think or feel. And if it's obvious to me in the first season or two that, like, they have no idea where they're going, often it doesn't go anywhere, you know? And it's not necessarily a skill, so it's just something that you'll pick up if you start broadening your horizons. When you talk about like Call of Duty, that leads into next week's topic. I want to talk about comfort games. Like, you don't know what you're missing because you have found your comfort spot and you sit in it and you pay the $60 a year fee or $100 a year, how much ever it is now, to buy the game and the Platinum Edition and the
Battle Pass,
Cheech and Chong DLC. Because you want a game to come home to and relax to and vent and just shoot a motherfucker, right? I want to be I just want to sit down for an hour. That's all that I have time. Or I'm a kid and I've got a couple hours after homework and I just want to be good at something. And, you know, you're missing so much by playing games outside of the AAA genre that are not there to steal your cash yearly.
Oh, dude,
to release a new game so that you feel like you have a need to buy new DLC, or all your cosmetics didn't transfer if you want that shiny new AK-47, you know. That's why they release these games year after year. And even just reading about this Harry Potter stuff, they're talking about like the Harry Potter verse has been under monetized for 10 years. Like, one of the things quoted from some bigwig CEO.
Sorry.
It's time to bring that back,
No.
he says. They don't view Harry Potter as a universe and a story to be told and finished. They view it as a thing that you can squeeze money out of.
Yeah.
Right? I will bet money right now that this new Harry Potter is going to flop after its first season as hard as the Lord of the Rings or the Halo show did, because they're making a sequel for money. There's no new source material. Yeah. They're reworking this. They're going to retell it. And on top of all that, they have the J.K. Rowling problem. which like that's a big deal.
It's kind of a big deal.
Kind of a big deal. So when you look for sequels and you find out a game is coming out with a sequel, ask yourself this. Look into it. See, it doesn't take very long. Is this company trying to finish the story they've written, that they've clearly designed from the start to do? Or two, is the world so unique and novel and amazing that you just want to experience more of it?
Yeah.
If you can't say yes to those questions, and the corporation making this can't say yes to either of those, you can probably bet that more often than not, it's not going to be worth your money. So at the end of the day, I think this whole conversation is don't pre-order games.
Yeah, don't pre-order games, folks. No, you brought up a couple things that I want to like. I don't want to make counterpoints. I want to make.
Yeah.
I want to use as examples. Breaking Bad, one of the greatest shows of all time, and I think that's of most people's opinion. It is one of the greatest
And
shows
the
of all time.
quote unquote sequels, they had Better Call Saul.
Yep.
And was that it?
Better Call Saul, and they also had El Camino, which
El
was
Camino, yeah.
was a movie.
Okay.
Yeah. All of those things I think were great. I think as far as we'll talk about Breaking Bad just by itself, because originally they didn't have plans on making additional content for Breaking Bad. It was at the behest of the viewers that they ended up making more content for Breaking Bad. So it was viewer outcry really is like, we want more Breaking Bad. How do you deliver more Breaking Bad when you've killed the main protagonist / antagonist? But let's use Breaking Bad as an example. The end was written before the show started, and you can feel that with the ending to Breaking Bad. I think Breaking Bad has easily one of the best endings to any major show of all time. It wrapped up the story neatly and succinctly and well, and I think that having that in mind made for such a compelling TV show, because there was never a fluff episode. Even in the episodes where it felt like you didn't get much new narrative or like new story development, they were focused on character development. A lot of people's favorite episode of that show is the one where they're chasing down a fly in their lab.
Or whatever it was.
Ozymandias, yeah. And why? Well, it's because you got a massive amount of character development during that episode. So even the ones that are a little bit fluffy, they contribute massively to the show. Whereas an example of a show that was supposed to be insular and then is Justified. I love that show. That show was only supposed to be one season and had a clear, defined end in mind. It was supposed to end at the end of the book written by Elmore Leonard by the name of Fire in the Hole. And because their first season was so good, viewers were like, hey, we need more of this. So they took the next couple books and made Justified season 2 and 3. The rest of it is all made up, right? Like it was just cast and crew were like, this is still really successful. People still want more, and the viewers still to this day want more Raylan Givens. So we keep getting more and more of it. I wasn't.
It's good TV.
It's great TV. I wasn't as big of a fan of the return of Raylan Givens in the last season. I can't remember what it was called. City Primeval.
Yeah.
Not as good as original Justified until the fucking end.
But still pretty justified.
Still very justified. So I think two prime examples of something where like you can have, you can go a little cash grabby, or you can go out there to please viewers and make it work as long as you stay true. Like as long as you make good content. That's I think the major rule there. And one where it was insular and just successful because it was good from start to finish. Right.
Yeah. It is easy to buy a sequel to a game you liked. It's easy to watch a sequel to a show or the next season of a TV show or a sequel to a movie. Why not just do it, right? Why not just take the gamble and do it? For me, something I've learned as I've gotten older, especially, is that I have a limited amount of time here. And for me, in the breadth of fiction that I've experienced, I'm totally fine with rehashing certain things, remixing and whatnot. But you find quickly that 90% of content is using 90% trope so that they can use 10% of their own idea. And tropes are great. Trope being like a standby thing that everyone knows that you can use as a foundation to build a story. But more and more often, and the older I get, the story that you want to tell seems to stop at the trope. Like, I want to make a superhero story, right? I want to make an isekai story. You get sucked into a fantasy world. That's cool. Like, as a creator, do that. You know, speak your truth, church, right? But as a viewer, a consumer of media, these things should be used as frameworks. And in Horizon's case, just as an example, they said, instead of moving away from the specific things that made Horizon novel compared to games of its ilk, let's lean extra hard into them. That is the way that I think sequels of games should work. Think of like the Batman games. I don't know enough about them. I've only played them a little bit. But from what I know, they found a game loop framework of this sneaking and punching that worked out really well. And then at least for a few sequels, they really found their groove.
Yeah.
I don't know how well the later Batman games did, but they found a combination of narrative and set and setting and game loop and mechanics that just felt amazing. When your idea of Batman meshes with how you physically play the game, that is why you play a video game, right? It's the same reason why, like, in a tabletop role-playing game, you want the mechanics to represent the fluff and fiction of the game, because you can gamify anything. I can make a game about being a lawyer and make all of the courtroom drama QuickTime button presses. That's doable, right? That's called gamification, as opposed to simulation. It is as far removed as from being a lawyer as possible. And when it comes to games, if you play a game and it's like, this was fine, I enjoyed the experience, but it did not hook me, just think twice before pulling the trigger on a sequel, especially from a AAA developer, because all they're looking at is the numbers. Yeah. Did X amount of people more buy this game than they did our previous game? Cool, then we're going to make a sequel to it, right? And more I'm seeing that in TV. We're talking about Halo and Lord of the Rings, and I've got every finger crossed that the new Fallout show is not going to fall victim to this, because it looks, like visually, looks fantastic. We've seen a few little clips. Looks on point. Doesn't tell me anything about the show, though.
Yeah.
You know, I want to enjoy it. I hope they do it well. But as far as sequels go, I don't think we're ever going to get rid of them. I think we will stop seeing less sequels of things from the 70s and 80s and 90s, because it's now 40, 50, 60 years ago. And more as we get older, we're going to see more and more sequels of things from the 2010s and the 2020s. But hopefully we will find a groove, and the general user base will understand that sequels are easy, and more often not, they're cash grabs. And just be aware of where you spend your money and your time.
We'll see. Ghostbusters Frozen Empire opened last week, and it made $45.5 million in the opening weekend. So
I don't even know what that is. Is that a movie?
Yeah, it's the new Ghostbusters movie.
Frozen Empire?
Yep.
Okay.
It's the sequel to the Ghostbusters movie that we went and saw a couple years ago.
These are not the people I'm talking to.
Yeah.
I have not seen a Ghostbusters movie a couple of years ago.
I thought you went with us.
I did not. I have not seen a Ghostbusters movie since Ghostbusters 2.
Oh.
So.
Well, it was actually pretty good.
Okay.
So, yeah. All right. Well, we've gone really long on this one, so I think we just ended there, gentlemen. Mm-hmm. Hey, I want to thank you guys for coming along on this ride with us. Yes. Let us know if you like this format, because this is the format we were talking about last episode, where where we get into a little bit more meta topics, and we have more of a conversation than we do, just throwing news at you. So we still plan on bringing you the video game news, but more than that, I think we want to expand and talk more meta subjects in the realm of entertainment. So if you like this episode, please let us know. YouTube.com/@VideoGameTango, VideoGameTango. You guys know all the places. Go smash buttons, hit follows, do the bells or whatnot, and please
the things.
Let us know.